Our verse for the year at All Saints is 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, which says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." As part of this year of thinking about weakness and God's sufficient grace and power at work in the midst of weakness, we've had a series of interviews where we've met different people from the church family who have dealt with some weakness in their life, but have also seen God's power at work. Today, we're going to interview Sarah Thrift, our Minister for Children and Accessibility, who has a hearing impairment. Sarah, I wonder if you could tell us what it means to have a hearing impairment and what it's like to live with a hearing impairment.
Yeah, sure. So having a hearing impairment means that I can't hear as well as other people can, and for me that affects both of my ears. My ears were damaged when I was very young. I had whooping cough, and that also affected the way my brain kind of processes sound as well. And so as a child, for me that meant I was always playing catch up at school, so I didn't really know what was going on necessarily, so I just kind of had to look at what other people were doing and try to follow along with them, which meant that I would often get that wrong. Thankfully, my mum is a teacher for the deaf, and so she taught me kind of how to lip read and communicate and sort of see the context of things in the body language of stuff. But I still had loads of times where I was told off when not really knowing why, and having really embarrassing things happen where I was just doing completely the wrong thing but thought I was doing it right. And then as a teenager I had a hearing aid, and I've still got a hearing aid, and I was just horribly embarrassed by the fact that I needed this thing to kind of help me do a normal thing like hearing, and that only old people are deaf. And so to put it in school, I used to kind of pretend to get something out of my bag and then put it in my ear really secretly, and then cover it over with my hair so that no one could see. So I just found it really embarrassing, and I just didn't want to be different, I guess, or weak. And then sort of all the way through that, growing up, even now, you just find yourself on the edge of stuff quite a lot when you have hearing problems, because you can't tell what's going on all the time, and particularly in crowds, so particularly in church, in coffee kind of situations, you can find yourself in the middle of a big group of people that feel really isolated because you don't actually know what's being talked about, or why people are laughing, or what they've just said to you. And so that's not a very nice feeling. And so I often avoid those situations or go to the edge of a crowd and just try and find something else to do. So that can be a kind of ongoing challenge, and just find it really tiring as well to constantly be kind of trying to play catch up and know what's going on.
Sarah, as we've thought about weakness over the last 7 months, has your thinking about weakness changed? The way you understand your hearing impairment changed?
So that's a really interesting question, actually. I think even though I found it really embarrassing and awkward as a teenager, I've never actually even considered asking God to heal my ears or maybe hear properly. It's just never even occurred to me. It's just always been something that I need to overcome and kind of do myself, as it were, I think. And so I think for me particularly, this weakness series has been really helpful in thinking through actually the weakness isn't necessarily a bad thing, and that accepting my weakness, not just my hearing impairment but other things, is really important, because until I kind of accept that and trust God with it, I will only be as strong as I can be, whereas if I sort of accept it and trust God, then I'm going to know His grace and His strength. So the following bit from our verse of the year says, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly in my weakness, so that I can know Christ's power. For when I'm weak, then I am strong." And I think I've really realised the amazing truth of what that means, that actually weakness might be hard, but it's something we can boast about and be glad about in many ways, because it's when we get to trust in God and lean on his strength and know his immeasurable grace in our lives.
Now, Sarah, what would you like the church family at All Saints to know about living with a hearing impairment?
I think the young version of me would want everyone to know that hearing impairments aren't just for older people. They are anyone can be affected, and I know I used to find it really hard to tell people, and still sometimes do, because I was really embarrassed. And then sometimes I would tell people I had this hearing impairment and they wouldn't believe me because young people don't get it. And so, just be aware that younger people can also have hearing impairments. And also to think through those coffee times, I don't know, spreading out a little bit more, just being aware that it can be a really isolating experience for people with hearing impairments. But also, more importantly than that, I think I want people to realise that we all have different weaknesses, different things we're challenged with in our lives. And actually, the more we can accept that and, I guess, embrace it and just give those things to God and be more open about them, actually, the more we're going to experience his amazing grace and his strength. And if we do that as individuals and as a church, and stop relying on our own strength and just lean into God with all of these different weaknesses, then we're going to be unstoppable, and that will be amazing.